if we can find a building where we can really add square footage, then it's something that it's worth the risk and worth me sacrificing my sanity for, because, it's essentially a recession-proof thing. I mean, we created so much value, we could probably never lose money on it.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB & Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 295. My guest today believes that the best time to buy real estate was 20 years ago, but the next best time is now. Joe DiSanto built a multi-million-dollar post-production company, produced critically acclaimed films and Emmy-winning TV shows, all while investing millions of dollars in real estate. Joe semi-retired at the age of 43, and now he's sharing his lifetime of fiscal knowledge and know-how through his company, Play Louder, which helps people increase their net worth and strategize their plan for the future. Joe, welcome to the show. Well, thanks for being here. Why don't we start with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started investing in real estate?
I consider myself more of like the regular Joe, quote unquote, when it comes to real estate. It wasn't my career, but it was something that even from a younger age, just like seemed like a really good idea. I was always kind of gravitated towards it. But like I said, it wasn't my career. I owned, as you mentioned, post-production companies in Los Angeles. I was more of like in the art field. But like I said, I just wanted to focus on real estate as a way to invest my savings, more so, I guess, than the stock market. A little bit with the stock market, it's a little bit of a mystery to me. I like investing and I learned about the stock market as best I can. But, when you go invest in a company and stock market, there's a lot of things you just don't know. You're kind of hoping that it works out, that company performs, that it doesn't necessarily have some unexpected issues. Who knows what those might be? But with real estate, it's a simpler thing. You own it. It's got some major systems, plumbing, electrical, whatever. You know all the things that can basically go wrong, how much it'll cost to fix them. It always just seemed kind of like a safer thing to me. I think it's a more stable overall investment in the short and medium and long term. So I put my focus on that and it worked out well, luckily.
I have to go to your production experience because you and we were talking before the show. We sort of ran in the same circles. I used to edit movie trailers, you post-production, TV production, which is why I was excited to talk to you, because it's always great to see people from one ecosystem merged into a completely different ecosystem. And we've both done that. But I'm wondering, what's your claim to fame? What are you most proud of when it comes to your Emmy-winning TV shows, commercials that you've worked on?
Our company, we decided to make our own documentary as a way to really make an inroad for ourselves in film and TV. And that was our first one. It's called Transcendent Man. And it's about the life and ideas of a guy named Ray Kurzweil, prolific inventor. And that documentary did very well at the Tribeca Film Festival. And that led to a few other projects. And the last one of which, the Emmy-winning TV show, is a show called Sonic Highways, which was made with Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters. And it was basically an 8-episode docuseries for HBO that chronicled the Foo Fighters making their 20th anniversary album, which is also called Sonic Highways. So Dave directed it. And we basically went to 8 cities where there were notable or really interesting recording studios, and also cities that had great musical history like Chicago, New York, LA, of course, Seattle, Austin, Nashville. Can I get them all? Washington, D.C. And New Orleans. And basically, we'd learn the musical history of the town, and then Dave would write the song kind of with inspiration from what we've learned, and then they'd record the song, and we document the whole process. And it was just an awesome show to make. And the fact that it was an HBO show really kind of was validating for us, because honestly, HBO is HBO. It's some of the top, television in the world. And the show came out great. I mean, Dave's a very talented guy, both in music, but in many areas. He was the director, and it just got a lot of great notoriety. It was nominated for 4 Emmys. We won 2. And that experience of like people actively wanting to watch, content we made and really like enjoying it and it being inspirational for them and, to be creative, that was like incredibly satisfying. So that was kind of like, before that came out in 2015. A few years later, my wife and I decided to leave the business. She's an editor like you. She was an editor on the show. She edited the Nashville episode. That was kind of, I guess, one of our major highlights. I mean, we had a lot of great highlights. We built a company that was successful. We grew it to about 30 full-time employees, and, which is a challenge in the entertainment business in LA. But that was a great project. Yeah.
So let's bring it around to real estate. In the introduction, I mentioned that 20 years ago, you believe was the best time to invest in real estate. The second best time being now. Talk about that a little bit. Why 20 years ago and why now?
That's an old adage. I don't know where exactly that quote comes from, but it's kind of a famous just quote of investing your time and stuff. And yeah, I mean, I believe real estate will and always continue to grow. I think it's just a solid investment, partly for the reason I mentioned earlier, but it's like people always need housing. We will always need housing. And it's just kind of like the oldest business in the world. And I like it because a lot of, nowadays, there's a lot of talk about, financial independence is become a big topic, especially with millennials. Like when I got out of college, like the internet literally just started practically. And like there was no blogs about financial independence, and you couldn't make a living online. You had to go like get a job or go start a physical business, like with a location, and invest money. But now it's like you can do so many more things. And then, the whole concept of financial independence has really become big, and in real estate investing in the passive income it potentially can create for you is a big foundational element of that.
So let's talk about your arc then as a real estate investor, because we were both in similar situations where you were probably making good money in the production world and post-production world. So was I. And at some point, we both realized we need to deploy this money in a way that's going to secure our financial future. What was that moment like for you, and what were your first steps?
We were doing our business, and our business in the first couple of years had grown where we needed to get more space. And I went out looking to lease space. And if you're familiar with commercial, you know that you have to often just renovate your own space. So you're like, wow, I'm going to go spend a lot in rent here, but I'm going to throw like $500,000 potentially, or even more, into renovating someone else's space. That doesn't really make any sense to me. And I just kind of used the whole idea of owning my own house. I'm like, well, we should just own our own building. Why would we be renting if we can have that rent going towards equity that, will be ours? So instead of leasing a space, we found a space to buy. And that became my second investment. And it's almost just like owning your own house, but it's just like the house for your business. But the funny part about it is when you do that for your business in commercial real estate, it's very much looked at, technically speaking, that you are on one side the owner, and on the other side, your business is the tenant. So you buy the building in an LLC, it's its own business, and the tenant just happens to be the business that you also own. But as in, owning your residence, you get some owner occupant benefits through like the SBA, and you can get in for, as low as 10% down, as long as you occupy 51% of the property. So we use that program, got into that building, but we were like, we have to do something to make more money with this. So we essentially bought like a warehouse space, did a whole change of use, renovated it into, essentially creative office. And doing that creates a lot of value in Los Angeles.
Let me ask you about that, because you brought up the SBA loan, the Small Business Administration loan, which is something that, if used correctly and in the right situation, can really make a project and a commercial investment pencil out nicely. Because you were looking for your own business, your own space, you qualified for the SBA loan. Can you talk at all about the numbers, like how much you needed to bring in. Maybe there was some construction and build outs you needed to do, what that looked like. And then how the SBA loan with 10% down or 15% down?
It's 10%, as low as 10%. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time the first time we did it. We ended up doing it again in 2017, but we closed on our building in March of 2008. So like in Lehman Brothers did the loan on the building, if that's like just a metaphor for that whole experience.
Nice. When they went away, did your loan go away too?
Well, luckily, I think literally we were one of the last loans they did because we were like, day came to close, no money showed up. And we're like, what? Wow, no one's ever seen this before. And 3 days go by and like we had quote unquote closed, but no funding had come through from Lehman Brothers. And this is before everyone sort of knew really what was going on. You know, it was sort of just starting to get out there. And so, you know, everyone got their lawyers out, we're making calls and just people are baffled. They're just like, you know, the loan broker's like, I don't know. Like, no one's getting back to me, you know. Finally, it shows up. They must have been sitting there going, we're going to go out of business. Should we just give these guys the money and just not ruin their lives? Or, you know, so they're like, yeah, hit the button. We got our money. And then cut to 3 months later and they're like, belly up.
We have to talk about that too. The fact that you bought your first commercial property right on the eve of the financial disaster.
The way the SBA loan works is, you know, you kind of have a project price. I mean, you can do it a few different ways, but if you're doing a thing that has a construction piece, you have your end result, which is your purchase plus your construction, and you're really financing for that end value. And, you know, you have to do the build out, you have to get a post-construction appraisal. It's all going to like, you know, work out as planned. And then your down payment really is a percentage of that total finished project price. But while you're doing the construction, you essentially have a bridge loan for the construction, you know, that's sort of packaged into the whole thing. So, you know, with the SBA loan, your first 50% note, you know, on say the final project is whatever bank you're working with. At that time, we were working with Lehman Brothers. And then the second 40%, you know, which 50 and 40 equals 90%, that'll be by like an SBA backed bank. And essentially the SBA guarantees that 40% loan. And that's why you can get in for 10% down because the initial bank's only in for 50%, you know, LTV. But you essentially bridge the construction with another bank. Sometimes it can be the same bank. Like our second time around, our main bank did the bridge loan too. And when you're all done, like I said, you do the appraisal and then you wrap it all up and the SBA loan comes in and refis out the bridge loan. Our bridge financer, which is our construction financer, also went out of business right before we started construction, which you're like, wow, that's just craziest thing I've ever, like, you know, this is new to me at the time too. I mean, I'm getting used to it. I really had only bought a house, you know, at that point. So now I'm buying a building. I'm dealing with the city. I'm dealing with a bunch of things that I didn't know much about, like environmental inspections and all that. And then that hits me and I'm just like, wow, this is crazy. So we're like literally a couple of weeks out from closing. It was a 6-month escrow and we lose this construction financing, this bridge loan. And they literally just dissolved, like the small bank that was going to do it, just like no longer there. And so I managed to piece together a limited version of the construction through wacky ways. Like, well, one, I went to the seller and was like, you need to lend me money because I know you're making a lot of money on this building and congratulations. But this just happened to me. And unless you want this deal to fall apart and you want to hit the market now, right in the middle of the financial crisis, you're going to have to give me a loan. And he did begrudgingly. And I paid it off. It worked out well for him. It was 10%. Anything I could get for the building through equipment leases, I did. So like all the air conditioning, anything that was like a physical item that could be brought in and or removed, I was able to get with like equipment leasing. Like so 5 or 6 year equipment leases. So that pieced together a bunch of like equipment. Then I managed to go get like a credit line, like that had a lien against our receivables on it. And I managed to like piece together about $450,000. My original budget was $750,000, and I got enough done for us to get in the building and get operational. And then I did more once we were in there over the next like few years to kind of really finish it out.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com.
It sounds like you really had to get creative on this. And I think going back to the seller, that was probably a pivotal moment to see if the seller would extend that loan to you.
He was selling it at a really good price, 6 months prior to the financial crisis, and he didn't want to go back to market now.
He'd get half of what he was selling it to you for.
And he was doing a 1031 into another warehouse space down in LA. And he was just basically had no choice. But I'm like, he was netting like $1 million or more on the building. And he'd only been in it for like 5 years. So I was like, loan me $125,000. And well, he put a lien on my house, to do that. I mean, my house is pretty max, but I'm like, yeah, take a third position on my house. If that makes you feel any better.
What size was this building? How much money are we talking about?
Ground floor plan is about 7,500 square feet. And it had a 1,500 square foot mezzanine, like steel structure mezzanine that had been built that actually wasn't permitted when it was built. And I managed to get it sort of retro permitted as attic space, which was another hurdle that I'm glad we managed to overcome. But it was like raw kind of industrial warehouse, and we got a change of use and, made it essentially our office, like quality, like good commercial space. So it's 9,000 square feet. And I think we bought it for $3.4 million. And by the end of it, we probably put in, I don't know, $600,000-$700,000 into renovations. But it's like our business paid for the renovation. Like our business would have been paying for renovations anywhere, whether we owned the building or not. So it was an expense our business had to undertake in getting a new space. I was able to capture the benefit of those renovations by owning the building. And then the building appreciated. And 8 years later, we got out of it and we about tripled our cash investment in the 8-year period. And unfortunately, I would have loved to do a 1031 into something else. I was trying, but it's like LA is so hard, especially when you're finding property for your business. Like you need to check a lot of boxes. And it just was impossible to find something that met our need that I could get done in the 1031 timeline. So sadly, we had to pay taxes on our gains, but it was still a big win. And we took, half of our money, put it in a new building and, just kind of pocketed the rest.
Let's talk about the next building. You went on to then acquire more commercial properties. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we were like, this has obviously worked out well, number one. And it's something that, I like to do. I mean, I jokingly say I really like the before and after photos. I don't necessarily like everything that happens in between the before and after photos, but it took me about 8 years to be willing to do another commercial project because it's a lot of stress, and especially when you're trying to move your business from one place to another, it's like you're out of your old place on a certain timeline. You got to get into the new place. And so there's a clock on you, let alone the financial pressure and, the just the question marks of everything happening the way that you want it to. Yeah, we sold the building. We were like, what motivated us is we wanted more space yet again, and we wanted more parking. And so that kind of drove us to really look at it again. And so we started looking. We ended up doing a lease. So we sold our building with the idea we're going to buy a new one. We did a lease back for 2 years with a 2-year extension. We managed to find the place, get it done, and all within 2 years. It was literally almost 2 years to the dot. Actually, it was probably 2 years and a couple months. But yeah, we found another space that essentially was a conversion, from warehouse to office. So we could create the value there. That one, we were able to create way more value because it was similar to our first building, like a warehouse, ground square footage was about 8,500 square feet, but there was room in there to put in new mezzanines, steel structured mezzanines. And we added about 4,000 square feet. So when you add 4,000 square feet in a building that, could sell for $850 a square foot, probably even more, but conservatively, you're adding a lot of value. And I was like, if we can find a building where we can really add square footage, then it's something that it's worth the risk and worth me sacrificing my sanity for, because, it's essentially a recession-proof thing. I mean, we created so much value, we could probably never lose money on it. But obviously the upside is just like instant equity the day we moved in. And I think, we probably created $2 million of instant equity, I would say, when it was done. But doing that in LA is tough. And it's all relying on parking. Like deals in LA, commercial real estate deals in LA live and die on parking.
And especially if you're adding 4,000 more square foot, you have to make sure you have the parking to accommodate that.
And that's hard to find. We solved that problem by putting in hydraulic car stackers in the lot that we had. The building kind of had enough parking in an adjacent lot to cover the 8,500 square feet, because you only needed like 1 per 1,000 for warehouse, but you need 2 per 1,000 for office, right? So it had enough to cover the 8,500, but if we wanted to do the mezzanines, we had to figure out how to get more in there. So we installed 9 hydraulic car stackers.
You'll have to explain what those are and how they work.
It's awesome. I mean, basically they're just car lifts, right? So it's a row of car lifts, and it's like a ramp. Imagine, you go drop your car off at the garage, the guy working under it lifts your car up on a lift, and then he goes and works under it. Well, it's similar to that. It's not open. It's a flat deck, but you ride your car on, there's a little button that hangs off like, the stacker itself. It raises your car up, and then someone else can come park underneath. And that's how a lot of the parking problems are getting solved in LA. I mean, people are doing like 3 and 4 stories of these with automated, elevators that, do circles to like, really Tetris cars into limited parking scenarios. So, all in all, those cost us about little over 100,000 to get those in there. But I mean, that's a small price to pay to capture all this extra square footage. And that's how we solved the parking problem. But it was touch and go. I mean, it was like, I was trying to get as much square footage as I could, but I could only get as much as the parking would allow me.
So that's a really interesting solution. And I'm sure you see that in LA and New York. You don't see it at all in Grand Rapids, as far as I know. You mentioned that it's $100,000 investment to get those car stackers. How many extra spaces were you able to get with that $100,000?
9.
So you're talking about $11,000, $12,000 per parking space. And is it fully automated? Do you have to have someone there to stack the cars and make sure it's done right? Or is it something your employees who are parking there can figure out themselves?
You're supposed to have an attendant. Yes, it's kind of like having tandem parking. But we had an employee, that we could train to be that attendant, so it wasn't like we had to have an independent attendant.
So you didn't have to hire a full-time person to sit there and watch 9 cars on a hydraulic lift. And you're saying it's possible to go up even more, like 3, 4, 5 stories on these hydraulics. And I think I remember seeing one in Chicago or New York and just kind of wondering, how does that work? And I was really kind of puzzled by it. But the way you describe it, it makes perfect sense. How much more would it cost to go up even more spaces if you wanted to add more?
I don't know off the top of my head. The price goes up, because the higher you go structurally, it gets a little bit more complicated. You got to do, bigger structural, supports below. Because part of that pricing included, pretty significant footings and all that, and concrete work and whatever to support those things and bolt them and everything. So as you can imagine, the higher you go up, the more expensive it gets per unit. But I mean, if it in our case, those 9 spots at 2 per 1,000 gave us 4,500 square feet of expandable square foot possibility.
When you added that 4,000 square foot, you had a parking requirement that you had to have 2 new parking spaces per 1,000 square foot.
Correct.
9 spots gave you exactly what you needed. That's great.
I mean, and the truth is, it was more like, how many spots can we get in here? Because if we could only get 8, well, we would have built built 4,000 square feet of mezzanine. But 4,500 was about the max we could get in there. So it actually just worked out. But I was like, every parking spot I lose, if I'm losing 500 square feet of mezzanine, I'm losing potentially $400,000 of value. So I'm like, I don't want to lose. I want to get as much mezzanine as I can out of this thing. So I got to figure out how to stack this parking lot, as well as I can.
You come from a very creative background, and you've given us 2 very creative solutions that you came up with to solve impossible problems. Coming up with 9 parking spaces, and then getting the seller of that first building to carry a loan when Lehman Brothers kind of fell apart. Do you have other creative examples of how you've applied creativity to investing in commercial property?
What ended up happening with the second building is I had my total budget, which was my purchase plus construction, right? So it was another SBA loan. And, I had a construction budget of maybe 2.3 or something. I had a 10% contingency. But we were really maxed out our amount of down payment we could do. It was still a lot of money to come up with. I think in the end, the project price was about 10 million all in, construction, purchase, carrying costs during construction, every last dollar. And I think we ended up a little bit higher on the down payment. I think we came in about 12% or something like that. So it was like 1.2 million. So I didn't have any extra cash really lying around to solve problems beyond that contingency. And what I ended up sadly running into is this time around, construction was really booming in LA. The one good thing about the last time when we went into construction, the financial crisis is, people were available, you know what I mean? And I could get some better deals because construction companies were going out of business left and right. Now they were very busy. So the table was a little bit turned in that sense. And my contractor just was the worst. I decided to spend a little bit more, went with a little bigger company because I wanted to avoid some of the problems I had the last time. And they were trying to rake me over the coals at every turn. Just egregious overages like you couldn't believe. It was just mind blowing. And it started day one. We had a budget based on a scope of work, and literally the first phone call I'm hearing $300,000 overage, for this, that, and the other potentially. I'm like, we're just starting here, So that was just how it was going to go. And it started with the mezzanines. We were talking mezzanines because that was a kind of first step. And all of a sudden the contractor's like, I can build you wood mezzanines for what's in our budget currently. I'm like, wood mezzanines? No one's ever talked about wood mezzanines. I don't want you to build wood mezzanines because I want these structures to be permanent. I want them to have another person after me be able to come in here, wipe out everything underneath it and do a new TI. And that mezzanine is the structure they're working on. So he's like, oh, well, for steel mezzanine, we're talking 3 times the price. I think we had a $200,000 overage. He was saying it was going to cost $300,000 for mezzanines instead of $100,000. So I'm like, that's just the craziest thing I've ever heard. I'm going to go figure this out. And literally, a Google search and 2 phone calls later, I've got a price to build my steel mezzanines for what's in the budget currently. And and easily to price, because I'm like, give me some justification for the price. He goes, well, I got to like go scope it out and I need plans. And I'm like, no, you don't. We're going to do 4,500 square feet. You can't get me like a square footage price and a mezzanine, just like at least some paper, napkin math. He's like, no, can't do it. Well, I made a phone call and I got basically quoted a price over the phone, $85 a square foot or something like that. No, does that math right? I have to go back and check that. But the total cost was about $100,000. Gave me that price on the phone, and that's pretty much what it came in as, like finished. Granted, we went through the process. I gave him the plans and the whole thing. And that just kept happening over and over. Every time anything changed, this guy's hitting me with overages that were just like astronomically crazy. And I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, the reality is here, dude, I only have a 10% contingency. I have to get my business in this building. Like I don't have tons of money lying around. So what I basically did was I took over half the construction. Every time he gave me a crazy price, I went out and priced it with somebody else. And it was continuously 1/3 to 1/4. The price he gave me is the price I got it done for with other subcontractors. So basically, I was like, take it out of the budget then. I'm going to go do it myself. So anything that was not like completely permit, like contingent, like millwork, flooring, painting, but even the mezzanines, we put in their budget because this was like the first go around. And he was like, all right, we'll work with that subcontractor. It's a good price. Sorry, I didn't know you could get it done that cheap. So that was kind of still in their purview. But all these other subs I took out. And then the whole parking lot, I end up taking out and doing myself under its own permit with the parking lot contractor. And I was able to completely remove it from the general contractor's purview. So I end up setting up, like, luckily the one good thing about this general contractor was they gave me a superintendent who was awesome and just a nice guy. And you could see like I was under extreme stress and, it was really cool to me and helpful. And he was really just trying to do a good job, like on behalf of the contractor, even though the project manager was just trying to screw me like every day. So I set up a folding table literally right next to Dave and he's managing his stuff for under the general contractor's, budget and purview. And I'm managing my subs over here and, interweaving them as best as possible. But I mean, I was creative on so many fronts. I mean, I actually, all the conduit for the low voltage, I did with my partners myself on the weekends, because like they gave me a price of like $50,000. And I basically did it myself with actually another electrical contractor for like 15. Took over the parking lot myself. We were getting a new electrical service, which was really difficult. That was under his own permit. I was able to take over that. I worked with the architect and did an initial set of plans for the architect myself using like a home design program, and then provided them with my plans so that I could not have a long back and forth process and save some costs there. So that was a huge way to be creative. And I just really like doing that anyway. So I guess really thinking back now, I mean, I was creative in multiple ways to basically save money. And the truth is, we came in just about 10% over. I mean, a little bit over. We used up our contingency and maybe I spent an extra $50,000 out of pocket. But I calculate I roughly saved minimally $750,000 than if I just listened to the contractor and basically signed every change order. Now, this whole scenario made my relationship with the contractor extremely strenuous. So I basically put my lawyer on every email. I was like, I introduced my lawyer as a new member of my construction team. And because at one point the contractor said that they were going to stop working until I signed the change order that they presented me, all of which they were giving me very little justification for, and I was pricing out and getting significantly lower prices. And so I got my lawyer and he's like, they can't do that. Your contract says they have to continue to work at the original stated scope and, direction if you don't want to sign a change order. And luckily they relented and actually started working again, but they literally stopped, and I'm just like, these are the people that give general contractors a bad name. But I could see how just, if you don't know what you're doing or you're not willing or have the time and ability to go in and do what I did, you just get killed, because once you're in, there's no way out. You know what I mean? And so it's either accept all the stuff that these people are throwing at you or come up with ways to circumvent them on your own. But if you don't have the time to do that, luckily I had three business partners, and I could go devote my whole, all my full time to this for like about 4 months. But yeah, in the end, I would say we minimally saved about $750,000, and we also got the whole thing done in 8 months. So my guess is we probably took 3 to 4 months off the timeline, because if I had let them manage all those subs, they would have just stretched it out, because they're also billing me every week for their overhead and time, right? So they're just completely disincentivized to do it fast, So it was crazy, but I managed to get it done just about within our contingency. And we managed to get our company moved in there in time, because we had this clock that was also ticking. We had to get out of our old place, because we gave notice to, we were doing the lease back. We gave notice to our old landlord, and he had rented the place out. So he's like, he was able to give us a couple extra months, because the new tenant he signed on wasn't going to start for a couple more months from when we were leaving. But he's like, time's up, man. So I really hope you can you can get in your place.
Did you have opportunity after the fact to give your contractor a bad Yelp review?
It was so hard that I just didn't even want to get in that. Like there was lots of suits going on. There was threat of suits going on. There's threat of, liens and stuff like that. It was just like the last thing I needed was to like go badmouth him, you know what I mean? Like in an open forum. It just seemed like it wasn't going to be a smart thing to do. So, if people have ever asked me, other friends who own businesses there, I tell people, face to face what my experience was, but I just don't want to go public with it, because I was just holding on, as it were. But, all's well that ends well. It's worked out to be an awesome scenario. I mean, it's a beautiful building. It's a standalone, essentially 12,500 square foot building in LA with adequate parking, which is pretty rare. And now, because we had, increased value, of course, and we were able now to get, just with the COVID and refining and lower rates, we were able to get in at a 75% LTV conventional single loan. So we actually just refied out our SBA loan. We didn't get any cash out, but we got the whole kit and caboodle at a much lower rate. So now we're actually, cash flowing quite significantly every month on the building. And it's like, I'm not an owner in the tenant anymore, which is my old company, but the tenant is my old company, still going strong. So me and my partners essentially, get cash flow out of it from the tenant rental, every month. And it worked out amazingly.
Tell us just a little bit about Play Louder and how our listeners can find out more about you or get in touch with you.
Play Louder is my consultancy, playlouder.com. So if you want to get in touch with me, just go there or email me, Joe, playlouder.com. And basically, I think I mentioned this a little bit in the beginning. When I left, I wasn't quite sure what we were going to be doing when we left our old life in LA, so we could essentially have more time for our family. But we started a blog, my wife and I, which is Play Louder. And then also my consulting work as an independent CFO just sort of took a little bit of a life of its own. So through my consultancy, I either, work on retainer for a variety of companies, and many of our creative companies in LA. But also I use the website as a way just to do education for like the individual person and individual investor. And I just put all of my knowledge about personal finance, about small business, and about investing, particularly real estate investing, that I've amassed, for my own benefit over the last 20 years. And I try to put that out there to help other people who are on a similar path, maybe save some time and, also realize the benefit of starting to plan early and really focus on investing.
How would people find out more about you or find your website or information?
Playlouder.com. You can go there and get lots of free info, but I also have some free and paid courses as well about real estate investing, about mapping out your plan to financial independence, and about also the benefits of starting a small business, incorporating, and all the benefits that come along with that.
Joe, I've really enjoyed talking with you about, just learning more about your creative business and the production world and the Emmy that you won, or the Emmys that you've won, and then how you're applying that creativity to commercial real estate investing, especially on the 2 projects that you built out using SBA financing. And I think it was helpful to understand how that SBA financing works and how you solved multiple problems along the way, culminating in having to work with this contractor, this general contractor, who sounds like he was just in it to kind of squeeze as much money out of you as possible. But thank you so much for having this conversation with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.